Excellent. Thank you very much, Addy. And I guess I first of all need to explain this photo because it's probably not what you expect to be the sort of career highlight for someone who's been working in the GIS industry for over 25 years. But it probably is one of my career highlights because it was one of the funnest evenings I've spent with my colleagues. It's an Esri UK company party about 5 years ago. The theme was black and white, and somehow we managed to persuade a number of our colleagues to dress up as pantomime clouds. So I'm not going to disclose who at Esri UK is in there. I am in there, but I won't embarrass any of my other colleagues right now. But you know, having some fun along the way of my journey has been absolute highlights. But as you will soon discover, cows have also featured through my career, which I will share with you. So I and I have got the dates in here, so you can do the maths. So it is a long time ago, but I started my career at Edinburgh University doing geography. I just went there because I loved doing geography. Edinburgh sounded like a cool place. I GIS didn't exist at this point. I am so old that I didn't have a mobile phone at university. Email wasn't really a thing, and I didn't learn anything about GIS. I had no idea what I wanted to do. But weirdly, when I came around to do my dissertation, which was to do with sort of correlation of port activity and asthma admissions, it was only afterwards when I discovered what GIS was. I was like, oh my goodness, if I'd had a GIS, I could have written a much better dissertation because I didn't actually use any GIS in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do next. And I guess one of my key learnings for those on the call now is that is absolutely fine. You can still have a very successful career without having a plan. And I still don't have a plan, but that is absolutely fine. And I just want to reassure you, because some of my peers when I was at university had absolute plans of what they wanted to do. And I've never had one, but I've been successful. So that's okay. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, and the reality was I just actually wanted to stay in Edinburgh to play some sport. So I looked around at what I might be able to do, and I ended up finding out that there was this thing called GIS, and I could do a master's in it. And I absolutely loved it. So it was combining an interest I had in computing with the geography, and I thought this is a brilliant way to spend the next year of my life. And without realizing it, I very quickly sort of became interested in the geography disease, which I then since found out had a posh word of epidemiology. But my dissertation, again, back in those days, we just got a big long list of things you could do for your dissertation. And I took this one, which was to do with the spread of E. coli and the distribution of cattle. That's the first link to cows in my career. And I became fascinated about this. And, you know, the sort of spread of disease and the sort of distribution of cattle became quite a sort of, I became a bit of a subject matter expert in that area. And it was only after that that then I realized I really needed to get a job. And lo and behold, by some absolute magic, a job came up at somewhere called the Veterinary Laboratory Agency, which is an agency of DEFRA down in Surrey, and I became their GIS data manager. And I basically worked with a whole load of vets. I was the only GIS person. I learned an awful lot about vets and disease spread, and I quite scarily had ownership of this quite important database for the world of research. So every time a badger is found on the side of a road, you're meant to phone up. It's collected, and then they test the badgers, and that allows them to map where there is incidence of tuberculosis, and there's some thought that there's a link between badgers and cattle. TB in cattle is really bad, but I was quite scared that I was responsible for this national database. But I think the two sort of key takeaways from this part of my career was that taking opportunities as they come up. I never went into that job thinking that I was going to be helping organising a conference, for example, but there was a plan to organise the first ever GIS and veterinary conference up in Lancaster. I thought, yeah, okay, I'll come along and help. I didn't just help, I ended up organising it. I ended up talking to the chief vet of DEFRA of the nation, and all sorts of things I never thought I would do, lots of things about people, lots of things about organising. And then, very sadly, while we were in Lancaster, this is an international conference, was 9/11, when the planes crashed into the Twin Towers. So suddenly I learned an awful lot about crisis management, because we had people from America, we had people who, including myself, who thought we had people, friends and family in the Twin Towers. And that was such an weird few days, but I learned a huge amount, nothing to do with GIS, nothing to do with what my actual job was, but about me and a person and dealing with people. And I guess my sort of another takeaway there is to take these opportunities, and things will come along in your journey as your career that you will never have thought would come along. And even the bad stuff can turn into a positive. And it's only reflecting on this period of my life when I realized I had a second crisis. So back in 2001, there was a thing called foot and mouth, which is a horrible disease that affects cows and pigs. And basically, when it was found in farms, the whole farm had to be slaughtered. But not only that, all farms within a certain distance of the farm also had to be slaughtered. So you can imagine that right now, when that happens, you need to know where the cows are, what other farms are within distance of the cows, and then modeling what the spread of disease might be like. So you can imagine the power of GIS during that. And again, I learned loads about GIS. I learned all sorts of things about working with people. And for me, that actually helped accelerate my career, which sounds horrible because it was such a dreadful period, particularly for the farming community. But actually, out of badness for me came some real opportunity. But after a few years, I was the only GIS person there. I realized that actually, I needed to sort of start learning from some other GIS people. And so I started looking for another job. And I decided I need to work for a very different organization, a big organization. And I went to work for an engineering firm called Atkins. So an absolute contrasting from the sort of government sector to a private, massive engineering firm. And I worked here for a couple of years as a GIS consultant and really started becoming a technical expert. I did all sorts of things. I learned loads technically. I got my hands dirty with whatever I was doing, but I wasn't very happy. And I didn't really know why, because I'm loving this, I'm loving the technology, but I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing, and I couldn't imagine myself there. And so my next takeaway is that if you are feeling like that, reach out and talk to people. So I had the best manager who just coached me through that. She could recognize, she was really experienced, that although I enjoyed the technology, what I didn't want to be doing was sitting looking at a computer screen writing code. Like, for some people that's absolutely perfect. For me, that was making me unhappy and I needed a change. And so she actually encouraged me to look at alternatives, but she actually also helped me get some education, some training while I was still at Atkins, to help develop more of my people skills, which turned out to be more of my strength. So I decided to leave Atkins, and I was very fortunate to find a new job at English Heritage. They're now called Historic England. Why they changed their names, a bit of a mystery, but anyway. And this is a point when the GIS industry was really starting to grow, and they needed someone to come in and develop their strategy. And I guess my next sort of takeaway is, when you're applying for jobs and you read through the description, I have never written a strategy at this point, but I could easily Google what you need to write a strategy. And it's like, a vision, I've got ideas, I'm good at writing, I'm good at people, and I could basically build up the things that I could do that helped me build that strategy. And so I was fortunate to get the job, and I basically spent 4 years implementing them, from being complete GIS newbies to being GIS was everywhere. And I guess this was the point where I really was able to reflect on the number of years of working in the 3 sort of locations. That what I loved about the technology wasn't just working with the technology, but actually was understanding what people's problems was, how we could then use technology to solve a business problem. So my business analyst skills, and that's where I started realizing that I had a real sort of interest, that I was quite good at it. I needed my technical background to be able to do that job, but I didn't need to be spending all my time using the technology. And that was, brilliant. I've got a picture of Stonehenge here. Absolute favourite day was when I was working with the Stonehenge team. It was at the point that we were modelling what the underpass was going to look like. That's only just been approved. It's taken years, but to avoid the main road going just past it. But I had the privilege of standing in the middle of that circle, touching the stones, smelling the stones, being with an archaeologist, and having an experience that the average person could never get. But also, just going back to how I got the job, in the interview, I still remember, bear in mind this is like 20 years ago, I remember them asking me, "Oh, tell us about your heritage experience." And at this point, I thought, I'm never going to get this job. There's going to be all these people that know about GIS and heritage. And so I was just really honest to them. And I said, I don't really know anything about heritage, but you've got loads of people in the organization. And as I've proven at my time at Atkins, I've been able to apply myself to suddenly knowing about highways and other sort of health areas. And then I was able to apply my technical skills to sort of disease. And what I want to do for English Heritage is apply my GIS skills to help you get the most out of your heritage. So if you want to get a job in a different sector, you don't necessarily need to be an expert in that sector if you're bringing your technical and GIS skills with you. After a few years at English Heritage, and we did some great things, and English Heritage is still doing great things with GIS. I sort of, again, was like not sure this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life. And I couldn't at that time pinpoint what it was about English Heritage that wasn't quite right for me. But now, many years later, I'm able to reflect, and it was the culture that I didn't like. And so I left English Heritage. I actually left without a job. I took a bit of a risk at the time because I was like, this is making me unhappy again. And I'm normally quite a happy person. I was like, there's something wrong here, but I didn't have the headspace to think, what do I want to do? So I chose to leave. And actually, a few weeks later, I ended up working for Esri UK. And I, at the time when I was at English Heritage, had already, I knew lots of people at Esri UK already, and I was a customer of Esri UK before I joined them. And they wanted someone to come in and be a project manager. I had never managed a project, but I was able to talk again about the skills that I had developed, my communication, my stakeholder, my risk and issue management, my people skills, my resource management, all the sort of assets. But I hadn't actually managed a project. But Esri UK were like, you sound like you might be able to do a good job. I have to laugh. This on the right, the photo of me, it's obviously not the most glamorous photo, but it's the best photo I have of me in a sort of corporate presenting pose at Esri UK. And I guess I put it up to sort of prove that you don't need to have like a polished photo to be successful as well. I think there's a lot of like stigma out there that you have to have this sort of perfect look, etc. So yeah, I'm looking a bit gormless. I'm mid talking. That's the best sort of photo I have, and I thought it was just worth sharing that you don't need a perfect corporate photo. But as I sort of joined with Esri UK and became a project manager, again, I just had this absolute passion of working with customers. I remember probably one of my favorite weeks where on the Monday I was with DEFRA and we were looking at the technology that they could use to count potatoes in field. So we're looking at satellite imagery and how we could use machine learning to count the potatoes and what the yield was going to be. On the Tuesday, I was down in Taunton with the UK Hydrographic Office, and we were looking at a global feed of ships, which I didn't even know existed, and understanding how we could use that feed to inform when there were disasters. So how could we get messages to ships when there's something like a hurricane coming? So trying to answer real business problems by using that technology. And if that wasn't enough, come Thursday, I did have a day at home on Wednesday, thankfully, but come Thursday, I was with Transport for London, looking at how we could use mobile data to count the number of people who were going through the tube network and what route they took, and therefore how they could change the signage underground as to where, as to sort of how to route people. And there are three quite contrasting things. I personally couldn't have answered a single question about the technology that we were using. I also am not an expert in potatoes, in shipping, or in sort of passenger flows, but I was absolutely able to contribute as a project manager of understanding their requirements and how we were then going to deliver a solution to meet their requirement. I should add, in this period of being a project manager, I also have my children. So I've got, they're now 13-year-old twins. So I had my maternity leave, and sort of then came back and sort of started thinking about the next stage of my career. And I moved on to becoming a senior project manager. It was a pretty natural progression. So I think one of the reasons that I was successful and I became a senior project manager was I use a phrase of being on it. If you're not a sort of, you've got a lot to do in the sort of business world, but you need to be on it. You need to make sure that your admin, your back office systems, the not very exciting things are done, or the business can't run. So that was really, really important. But I guess my skills and expertise at being able to tease out these requirements from people and then fundamentally deliver successful projects allowed me to progress. And I started taking, I became the senior project manager for government, and was responsible for the delivery of all the projects in that area. So that's where I started developing my mentoring skills, my project management skills, etc. And then finally, to this present day, I'm an exec manager. I'm part of the Esri UK management team. I don't work with GIS much anymore. I do have it installed on my laptop for my own sort of personal thing, but I don't actually touch any technology in my day job anymore. I'm working with people every single day and I absolutely love it. But what I'm doing is helping our customers understand how to use our technology and helping develop our people so that they can do what they need to do. So that's my sort of potted history, and hopefully my takeaways, which are it's okay to not have a plan. Take the opportunities around there, sort of back in my early days of helping out at the conferences, talking to other people. If you're like, this isn't quite for me, everyone's got different experiences, what's worked for them, what's not worked for them, might give you ideas of jobs and things as you go through your career to think about. Culture is really important. So I've been at Esri UK for 16 years. For me, the Esri culture is absolutely the place that I want to be in. And it took me a while to recognize that was a thing that was missing. And I actually think it was absolutely fine for me to work in the organizations I worked in early on, where the culture wasn't necessarily right, because it gave me different experiences, but certainly longer term, I needed to find that culture. And the culture that I want will be different from the culture that you want. And so it's important that you sort of think about that as you progress your career. And if you're having a little niggle, it might be the culture that is the thing that's niggling you. And then finally, to end, I guess, I've talked about some of the logos that I've worked with. I probably could put about 100 logos up there. Ordnance Survey, I think anyone who's sort of got the geography background, is obviously a bit of a flagship sort of name you want to work with. And I had some great time developing products, and I get great pride every time I buy an OS map now, knowing that a project I delivered is Esri technology that's behind that, that's helping to deliver that, and I was part of that project. But I could name hundreds of projects that I've been involved with, and that's for me has been the absolute highlight, is applying the technology to the business problems and helping other organizations be successful. And like everybody else, we had this photo at the beginning, a fun party, and cows have definitely been a big part of my my sort of life. Like others, Esri UK have every year you have a team experience day. So this is about to go paddleboarding. Once I'd been paddleboarding, I wish I'd been paddleboarding before I went with my colleagues. I fell in the water lots. We had a lot of laughs. This is me here. Another one, we went mountain biking in the Forest of Dean. I'm a much better mountain biker than I am a stand-up paddleboarder, but that was a lot of fun. This is actually week 2 of starting at Esri. Cows continue to be a theme. You got more points on the cycle to work day for coming in fancy dress, and I'm quite competitive, so I beat this guy here because he just came in his normal clothes. But that's a very old photo, but still a very favourite day. Canoeing down the River Wye, which was great fun. It was only about halfway through the day that I discovered that one of my colleagues is terrified of water, so that was quite entertaining. This is a comedy thing where I somehow won a golf trophy from Esri Canada. So I'm in Canada, working with Esri Canada, who's another distributor, and somehow I managed to hit the longest drive, having never really played golf, and came back to the UK with a golf trophy. Um, and this was a really special day a couple of years ago. So this is with a software provider that we use, and they called Contata, and they invited me to join them at the Management Consulting Award. So I didn't know any of the people apart from the lady who's next to me who works for Contata. So these were other customers of theirs, but we were the only all-women table at the Management Consulting Awards. Esri UK weren't there. It was me invited as a guest of theirs, but again, an amazing opportunity to network with a whole range of people. So yeah, so that's me, and hopefully that's given you an insight and some things to think about, as hopefully you all have wonderful careers over the next 25 plus years. Thank you.